Hello and welcome back. My name is Ned. I am a technical evangelist at Caspio, and in the second video of this ultimate video guide, I'm going to teach you how to build a multi-step form using Caspio. Let's take a look. So here's a live example of a multi-step form, and the benefit of having a form like this is that you can divvy up information into multiple steps in order not to overwhelm the end user. So for example, if you start filling out a form, let's just say John Doe, and let's say you fill out the rest of the required fields. I'm not going to fill all of these fields out because they're not required. And let's just say weight 180 pounds. We're also going to be learning how to calculate on a submission form and actually see the calculation in real time. Once you fill in all the required fields, you can go to page 2. And on page 2, you can continue filling out the rest of the form. So this is the type of form we're going to learn how to build in the next couple of minutes. So let's go to Caspio and take a look. Once you're logged inside your Caspio account, it's very easy to begin building a database application. If you've seen the first video of this ultimate video guide, you'll know that all you need to do is click on this link, and then you can begin by importing data. So if you have data in Excel or Access database, you can bring that data and maintain all the database relationships as you bring the data into Caspio. That's not what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be building this application from scratch. Next thing that you want to do is give your application a name. You're going to have your own naming convention depending on the app that you're developing. In this use case, we're building a very simple form, so I'm just going to call this multi-step form. Once you click finish, you will be able to see that application listed on your home screen. From there, all you need to do is click on open to locate these objects on the left-hand side. The most important object where you want to begin building your application is always going to be the tables object. Tables are the foundation or the backbone of any app that you develop, and it's very easy to build a table. Just click on new table link here at the top. Now in this example, we're building a patient intake form. So naturally, we want to input all the fields that will store patient information inside this table. I'm going to add a few fields at a slower pace, but then I'm going to quickly add the rest of the fields, and I will explain and point out all the different and important data types as we apply them to each of the fields. So the most important field that every single table needs to have is some kind of a unique ID that's going to uniquely identify each record inside the table. I'm going to start off with patient ID. And for data type, Caspio gives you 4 different IDs that you can select from. I'm going to use random ID, and you can see how Caspio immediately flagged it as a unique field, which means that every time you add a patient to this table, that patient is going to be uniquely identified by that number. Underneath that, we want patient name. Let's also have phone number, age, and now let's quickly fill in the rest of this table. Now that I have quickly added these fields to my table, let me just explain some of the data types, key data types that you need to apply depending on the type of data that you're collecting inside the form. For example, patient name, phone, age, and gender. This is going to be textual data that we're submitting to the table. Therefore, I have opted out to use text 255. For my height in feet, inches, weight, and BMI, which we're going to learn how to calculate using a formula, we want to select data type number from this dropdown because we're going to be storing numerical data inside the database. Family medical history, these are going to be checkboxes that the end user is going to be able to check off as they fill out the form. And for that, we're going to choose to use list string. When you select list string as your data type, and you look over here on the right-hand side, you're going to be able to input all of your options here as to what you want all of the checkboxes to be. For exercise and dietary considerations, I chose to use text 64,000 because I want them to list all of the different answers or be able to type out any of the information they want for these 2 fields. For habitual consumptions, I also chose list string, and I have listed my options here on the right-hand side as my checkboxes. And for occupational stress factors and medications taken, once again I chose text 64,000 because I want them to be able to type in more information for those 2 fields. And last but not least, I have date submitted, and I chose to use timestamp because I would like to automatically stamp the date and time of the submission when the user submits the form. Once you're done inputting all of your fields and modifying all of your data types, click on the Save link, and then give your table a name. I'm going to call this very simple UVG patient info. Once you click finish, you will be able to see your very first table listed. If you open the table now, at this point, you will see it's an empty table. There's no data inside it because we just constructed the table from scratch. In order to populate the information inside this table now, as the end user is submitting the form, we need to build that submission form. And to do that, we're going to go to Data Pages. And all you need to do is click on this link to launch Caspio's point-and-click data page wizard. From here, Caspio has a very simple and intuitive process. You simply select a submission form and hit Next. For your data source, that needs to be your table where you plan on storing the data. And we only have one table created, so make sure you select that table as your data source. Let's give this a name. We're going to call this Patient Intake Form Part 1. As for your style, this deals with aesthetics, the look and feel of your form. Your account will come with some preloaded styles. I'm going to go ahead and use the pre-configured style that I have for this video and continue. On this screen, it's asking me what fields do you want to use in the web form. This is going to be part 1, so I'm not going to include all the fields. I'm only going to include a select number of fields, and then when I build my second form, we're going to include the remainder of the fields. So let's go ahead and include patient name all the way up until policy number. The rest of these fields, this is going to be part 2 of our form. Also, very important thing to do here is you have to check this box on exit, pass ID and formula fields as parameters. What that basically means is you're going to be passing this ID from form 1 onto form 2. That way when you submit the form or both parts of the form, all the data is associated with that specific ID or that patient. So let's continue. Once you reach this screen to configure properties, here you can select all of your fields on the left-hand side, and you can make modifications on the right side. If you wish to see what the form looks like at this point, you can always click on the preview button, and here's what the form looks like. It's a very simple one-column form. I'm going to show you how to create multiple columns, how to create some drop-downs, and also add some placeholders, and finally, we're going to learn how to do some basic calculations on this submission form. So let's go back to Caspio. And I'd like my form to have 2 columns, and that's a very simple configuration. All you have to do is select this section and number of columns, select 2, and here you can choose to have the label position be on the left, or you can place all of your labels on top of the fields. I'm going to go and choose left, hit preview again, and now you can see how my form has 2 columns. You can actually have 3 columns or 4 columns. It's completely up to you. It all depends on the content of your website and how much real estate you have on your template as you embed this form into your website at a later time. Let's see how this form compares to my live example. So I do need to make a few more modifications. I'm going to add a placeholder for my phone number field. For my gender field, I'm going to actually create a drop-down to have male or female. And then for my height, I want to put these fields side by side. So let's go back to Caspio. Here is my phone number field. To add that placeholder inside the field, go to the Advanced tab, and here under Placeholder, you can actually add whatever format you want to have for your phone number field. So once you add the placeholder and hit Preview again, you will now see how we've inserted that placeholder inside the field. For my gender field, we said this is going to be a drop-down, so let's go back to Caspio, select Gender. On the Standard tab, instead of that being a text field under Form Element, we want to select Drop-down. So we're going to add our own custom values now. The first option in my drop-down is going to say Select Gender. Make sure you delete the value because you don't want that to be stored inside your table. Then click on the New button and then simply just say Male or Female. At any point, you can always hit Preview. And now you can see how we have a very nice drop down for the end user to select or specify either male or female. For my height, we said we wanted to put the feet and the inches side by side. So let's go back to Caspio again. Select height. I'm just going to remove feet from my label. I'll tell you why in just a second. In the Advanced tab, we're going to say continue next element on the same line. If you check this box, that basically means that the next element, which is the field after the highlighted field, is going to be on the same row as the highlighted field. Inside my placeholder, I'm going to say feet, and then for inches, all I'm going to do here is say no label, and I want my placeholder to say inches. Now when you hit preview, you can see how I removed that text from my label, so now this is my main label, but I'm using the placeholder to put feet and also inches. I don't like that these two fields are so wide, so let's change the width. And that's also a very simple configuration. Under height for feet, go back to the standard tab and specify maybe pixels. Let's say 90 pixels in width. Same thing for the second field. We're going to measure that in pixels. And now when we hit preview again, you will see how it fits. It's a little bit more aligned with the rest of the fields. Now let me teach you how to do a basic calculation to calculate BMI. Once you select that field, what you need to do under the dropdown is select calculated value. And here's where you add your formula. Now this is a very simple formula to calculate BMI. You can actually Google this, but you do have to know how to insert that formula inside Caspio using the function button, because this gives you a variety of different math functions. You can also have text functions, date functions, and miscellaneous functions. So if you come from Excel background, this might look familiar to you. But inside the screen is where we add our formula, and let me show you how we do this. The first function I'm going to add is something that's called isNull. IsNull basically means that if the value it doesn't show up, or if it's blank, it's automatically going to replace that with a 0 by default. Now inside the parentheses, we need to actually add our formula. Now to calculate BMI, you simply have to add number 703 times, and then you insert your weight field. So let's insert the field called weight. After that field, we're going to add a division sign. And then you have to times the height feet by 12 and add that to the inches to the power of 2. To add the power of 2, that's a math function called power. And in between the parentheses, you have to insert both the height in feet and also inches. So let's go ahead and insert that field first for feet. And then we need to times that by 12. Then you add a plus sign, and then you add your inches, comma, 2. Because again, it needs to be to the power of 2. We're trying to multiply this first, then we add height in inches to that, and then all of that is to the power of 2. And then one last thing that's left to add is comma 0. This is for isNull. So if this is blank or it doesn't exist or it's not calculated, we automatically want to replace that with a 0. At this point, you can verify your formula. It looks valid. Close that screen. Let's hit preview again just to make sure that it's working correctly. So now if I input my height and also my weight, you can see how it calculates the BMI. I just want to have 2 digits after the decimal, so let me modify that as well. That's under formatting, custom, number, and I want to have 2 digits after my decimal. Hit OK again, preview one last time, and now you can see how we maintain only 2 digits after the decimal. Perhaps the last thing that I want to do to my form is just add a very simple heading. So let's go back inside Caspio and insert. Here at the very top, we're going to insert what we call an HTML block. Now if you watched the first video, I gave you a detailed overview on how to add a heading and also subheadings. We're going to make something very simple. We're going to call it patient intake form part 1 of 2, and we're going to put this in parentheses. And I'm just going to highlight the text and change the format to maybe heading 3, just to make it appear a little bit bigger. Once you add your heading, the last thing that you want to do is on the following screen. Instead of seeing a confirmation message, we want to redirect the user to part 2 of the form. So here, instead of seeing a display message, we want to go to a new page. Now you do have to have a URL or a web page created where you plan on embedding that part 2 of your form. In my example, I happen to have that page. I'm calling it form_2_p_2. So this is the name of my web page. You might have a different naming convention completely. I'm going to be deploying part 1 of the form on this page, and then when they click on submit, they're going to be redirected to a different web page. So let me go ahead and add this URL inside this text field. So form underscore 2 underscore p underscore 2.html. And I want to keep it relative to maintain the entire URL name. Once you're done, click on finish to save your changes. And now all you have to do is deploy the form to your web page. So you do that by clicking on the deploy link, enabling access, and then copying this code. So just you can right click and copy, or you can just do Control C on the keyboard. And then inside my template, which is part 1, I will find my placeholder, I will paste my Caspio code, I will save and publish my web page, and then when you go to the website and you refresh, you should be able to see that form seamlessly embedded on your web page. Now you do have to make a few more modifications on the form to make things a little bit more aligned. You could reposition this field at the very bottom. You can also shift this down so it's underneath the heading. I'm going to show you how to do that really quickly because I do want to have the form look clean during this presentation. So I'm just going to make one minor change. I'm going to click edit here. And instead of placing my heading inside an HTML block, I'm going to copy that text, remove the HTML block, and insert a header and footer. And inside the header section, I'm going to paste my text one more time. I'm just going to change the formatting to heading 3, save my changes, and now when I refresh the form, you will see how it looks a lot cleaner because the HTML block is part of that section, so it's also going to place that text inside those 2 columns. But if you put it in the header of your data page wizard, then you're going to have that heading appear at the very top of the form. So now the correct behavior is going to be, if I fill out this form and click submit, it's going to take me to a web page called form underscore 2 underscore p underscore 2.html, where we're going to be building now the second part of our form. So let's go to Caspio and create that part 2. Once again, click on the new data page to launch the Caspio wizard. And this time you want to select single record update instead of submission form. If you leave it as a submission form and you hit submit on part 2, it's going to create a new entry in your table. However, if you select single record update, it's just updating that same row as we fill out part 2 of the form. So let's continue. For your data source, make sure you have the same table. And let's give this data page a name. I'm going to call this patient intake form part 2. I will use the same style as before, and then continue. On this screen, a slight modification is needed. For parameter name, we have to add some text here. Insert record patient ID. When we submit part 1 of the form, on exit, we're passing the parameter. Now in part 2 of our form, we have to receive that parameter. So a little bit of syntax is needed here. Let's continue. In part 2 of our form, let's include the remainder of the fields. So I'm going to include the rest of these fields. And then continue. Let's modify part 2 of our form. I'm going to put these 2 fields next to each other. And for family medical history, I'm going to change the form element to a multi-select list box. I'm also going to do the same thing for habitual consumptions, multi-select list box. And for the rest of my fields, I'm going to turn these into a text area so that I can give more space to the end user to type more information. For exercise, we're going to change that to a text area, and we're just going to repeat that process for the remainder of the fields. And the last thing I'll do is I'll put these fields in 2 columns, and we already know how to do that, so let's go to the section and say number of columns 2, and I would actually like to position my labels on top of the fields. On the next screen, you have the ability now to modify your confirmation message any way that you see fit. I'm going to keep this the way it is and simply just save my changes by clicking on finish. Now watch what happens when I deploy part 2 of the form into my website. So I will once again hit deploy, enable status, copy my deploy code, go to my HTML document, and on part 2, I will find my placeholder. I will paste my Caspio code. I will save my document. Let's go to our website. The exact behavior that we should expect is when I fill out part 1 and hit submit, it should redirect me to that second web page where we have now deployed part 2. So let's take a look. Maybe John Doe. Let's add the height, maybe 6 feet and 3 inches tall with weight 190. It's going to calculate my BMI. So now when I hit submit, it should take me to part 2. And there's the form that we just created. We created two columns. We have the labels on top of the fields. We have our checkboxes side by side. I'm going to fill out a few of these checkboxes. I'll just add some sample test data in the rest of the fields. Hit update. There's my confirmation message. Now let's go to our table and verify that all the data is on the same row. And there's John Doe, and if we scroll to the right, you'll be able to see the rest of the data that's been populated in that multi-step form. This is how in Caspio you can very quickly and easily build a multi-step form. I hope that you enjoyed the video, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video where we talk about relational forms and how you can establish one-to-many relationships as you fill out the forms that you create inside Caspio. Thanks for watching. Hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video.